mix of food expertise and home systems and appliances firm expertise with Joe. And, actually, why don't you guys spend a minute each kind of telling the folks who you cover and kind of look at every day. Why don't you start with you, Susan?
Sure. So, as Mike mentioned, we're from the NPD Group. We're a market research company. Probably not the typical person that you see speaking at the SKS. But we're really excited to be here. And I work in an area where for almost 40 years we have been tracking everything that Americans eat or drink. So we understand the what, when, why, how people are preparing foods, beverages throughout the day and at restaurants. So we have a lot of great perspective on generational shifts and why people do what they do, which translates directly into the kitchen and everything in the home industry, which leads me to Joe.
And my name is Joe Derochowski. I'm the home industry advisor. I love coming to this show just because I love hearing all the ideas that you guys do. I track the sales of housewares and kitchen electrics and home environment, and I speak to all the GMMs and DMMs at the major retailers to help them figure out ways to grow their business and how to think and market about their business and what products they should be thinking about, as well as manufacturers of kitchen appliances, where they should be spending their innovation dollars, how to adjust their marketing and identify ways to grow for them.
You know, Beth Altringer in the early session today had some fascinating data about the shifting budget of time and how people are spending their time. And I bet that's very related to what you guys are seeing ultimately over a long-term time horizon with purchasing both in the home and outside of the home.
Can you tell that I'm ready to
Yeah, you're so excited. Go.
Yeah.
Go.
I made a whole page. I wrote down all my thoughts when she was saying that because first of all, I love it when data sources come together and kind of corroborate one another. And the things that she was talking about, yes, everybody is snacking more, but also using more snack foods at main meals. So snack foods are more prevalent at breakfast as well as lunch. That's one of the reasons why the amount of prep time has declined. I think she said it was 60% through 2006 and 2014. Part of it is we're using ready-to-eat foods, particularly at lunch in the morning. Think of it as kind of a bento box of snacks to make a lunch. Now, I want to be clear, sandwiches are still the number one thing. The big things are the big things. What's the number one food at breakfast? Cold cereal, one of the fastest declining categories that has now stabilized. Okay, so the big behaviors are big, but you've got other things going on. Another reason why probably there was a decline there in terms of the amount of time that we spent on food prep was you have to think about demographics. So let's look at millennials and boomers. Any Gen Xers in here? We're so unloved.
The forgotten generation.
We are, and we're the fulcrum point.
Elon Musk is a Gen Xer, right? So
True. We're the fulcrum point of food changes, and I'm going to let Joe talk, but think about this. So Gen X, if you profile us, in a lot of ways, we show up as like the average American in terms of what we eat and what we do. We seem kind of boring. In the meantime, we've got boomers that as they've aged, and during that time period of 06 to 2014, I think they moved from into their early 60s, so into retirement, into a life stage change. And they did not step back from maybe careers and into their empty nester phases and say, I'm going to cook more. Not at all. They actually generationally are using less fresh foods than the preceding generation when they got into their 60s and relying more on convenient foods. So that's one thing. Think about that mass of the population during that time that was getting more convenient in their choices. On the other side, you've got the millennials that generationally were very different. We've quantified it. They are a generational break who are using more fresh foods, store perimeter, and spending time on what they were preparing because it was experiential, it was social, it was during the recession. Their usage of restaurants went down. But did they spend more time preparing those meals? No. They found shortcuts, they found hacks, and for them, homemade is assembling, or starting with something that is already maybe pre-prepared and putting your personal flavoring. It's the Betty Crocker effect, right? Yep. So that's why you've got two generations moving in very different directions, but reducing that time overall. Joe, I'll let
You
talk
solved the
about
mystery, that
appliances.
reduction from 2006 to 2014, where prep time just shrank and then stabilized. Probably what I'm hearing is due to to millennials who are assembling, but not necessarily really preparing food in terms of cooking from scratch. And then the baby boomer, the other big bubble in the population, we're kind of just moving towards convenience foods.
Right,
So-
right. And at the same time, too, you have a lot of delivery coming into
Yep,
play
yep.
and carry out. And you've also got meal kits, but that's not big enough to move the bar that much. And there's other things.
And how does this translate into in terms of what people have in their homes, in terms of cooking equipment and gear?
Well, I think a couple things to think about too is while there are differences in generations, there's also some underlying current commonalities. Like if you look at the growing parts of the population, it's that 25 to 40-year-old and it's the 60 plus. So it's basically the boomers and their kids. And they're all interested in health and wellness. They're all interested in entertaining more at home. And so the way they define health and wellness might be different. The way they define entertaining might be different. But that underlying need is the same. So as you are working on appliances, you can actually work for both sets of these growing parts of the population, solving a similar need, but they act upon it very, very differently. And so it's how do you adjust those nuances by generation? But more importantly, how can you make a 1 + 1 = 3 by having one generation influence the other? Because they're all hitting similar life moments. That millennial generation is hitting their first time getting married, their first new home, so they're buying a lot of these appliances you're looking at. Those boomers are becoming empty nesters, and after 2-3 years of travel, they decide, I'm gonna either upsize, downsize, or remodel. Well, whatever the answer, that's an opportunity that they're gonna restock the inventory and the counters that they have on their kitchen. So it's, while there's nuanced differences, there's a lot of money in similarities. And then Gen Z and Gen X, Gen Zers saw the Gen X parents getting laid off in 2008 and 9. There's a certain change, and there's a lot of similarities that they have with millennials, and Susan can talk about the eating behavior of Gen Z, but it's seeing these consistencies between generations. How can you better leverage that while still speaking to the nuances of each generation?
We also talked a little bit about makers, and that's kind of coming in, that's just kind of been a thing over the past 10 years. When you think about maybe it's millennials, maybe it's Gen Z, is this part of their ethos and part of what their identity is they think of themselves as like, is cooking something that they could see as their core identity, or is assembly enough? Like they don't need, like they're doing making things and building things in other respects of their lives.
It's a little bit different between millennials and Gen Z. So if we think about millennials, a lot of what food was about, I mean, they were growing up during the advent of Food Channel and Food Network and Chopped and the celebrity chefs, right? And the rise of the internet and accessibility to things. Even if you live in a small town, you can experience different things. So experiential through food was something that definitely resonates with them. I mean, it's a thread that carries through many aspects of their lives. You know, one of the fastest growing generation who buys RVs? Millennials. Because they want to get out and travel and see the US. Now, it's not the big giant RV. Right. It might be the sleek Airstream. But so food is very experiential. And the other piece of it is they were coming of age during the Great Recession, and they did not adopt restaurants at the same level as other 18 to 34-year-olds. So they were forced more in-home, and they used that as entertaining and connection. Food became about social and connecting. And it was very much so also about like trend and the Instagrammable moment. Now with Gen Z, it's a little bit different. We have to think about Gen Z and the fact that foodie culture, they were born into it, as well as they're growing up with an understanding of the functional benefits of foods that the rest of us didn't grow up with. Yeah, we knew carrots were good for your eyes, but think about how they've grown up with maybe family members who are on a free-from diet of some sort, and how they can name all the kids in their class that have a nut allergy, a dairy allergy. They're very aware of food and how it impacts health. They've grown up in an expectation of global cuisine, different flavors, and accessibility to that. They also have grown up with technology all in place. They're adopting the touch screen. They didn't have to learn what the email was in 1994 at one of my first jobs, right? So for them, a lot of this is expected. So how does that translate into food? One is portability is extremely important because it's about fluidity, meeting them in the moment, where they are, when they want it, what they want. Okay, so let me give you an example. Today, we are deciding with shorter and shorter time frame what we're going to eat. Like if you think about food planning, my grandmother sat down on Sunday and laid out the entire week, and it was a protein, a starch, and a vegetable, sometimes 2 proteins because she was a good farmer's wife, and she implemented it. Now, today's version of that, as far as I can tell, are meal preppers that maybe on Sunday make a whole batch of grilled chicken and vegetables and then plate it out for their lunches throughout the week, but they're eating the same thing. It's not necessarily full-blown meals every day, right? If you take it to the next extension, it's about thinking, I'm hungry, what am I want to order? Oh, am I going to order Uber Eats or Grubhub to bring it to me? Am I going to have Domino's deliver it to the park bench? Am I going to reach in the pantry and grab it? I mean, it's almost about access. So any way that you can help people access food with the shortened lead times that we're starting to think about it, you can help. So I look at AnyCart. I just heard AnyCart. Was anybody downstairs
Yep.
in the AnyCart? You pick the recipe, and they, within an hour, send all the ingredients to you. If they can pull that off, the average time that people think about when they're going to make dinner or what they're going to do for dinner is 4 o'clock. That's a big competitive advantage for a retailer versus a restaurant. Is it going to, and I don't know who's going to ultimately, but those are some different things. It's about access, portability, and fluidity. Functional benefits are expected for Gen Z. So it's not much the experiential, but it's some different things that tie into what millennials put in place.
It'll be interesting to think when you talk about millennials, like they're getting to having the kid phase, and all of you who have kids, like the second you start having kids, especially when they start getting into 3, 4, 5, and 6, when they start fighting you on texture and stuff, like you're gonna run into more convenience versus the quality. So you'll see people, like you said, the level of involvement. This millennial generation became very hot into craft coffee. They would make it because they wanted to do some artisanal. I guarantee you the second they start having kids and they've been in the household for a while, here comes the single serve or the push button coffee that's gonna come around. So, but that said, younger men of this generation learned how to cook, where when I was at that age and the other folks older than me at that age, we didn't know how to cook as much. So this younger generation is smarter at cooking a little bit than what we were and generations before us were. I'm a boomer, so sorry. At that time, how that works out, I just think this group is smarter, but the appliances have got to pick it up because they're going to hit convenience.
That shift towards younger men learning to cook, was that part of like just the acceptance of the chef and kind of this is like a pop culture identity being kind of very cool and kind of coming into vogue over the past 20 years with like celebrity chefs and kind of this, the online kind of cooking contest. Was this something, and barbecue, right? Like kind of grilling became like a thing. Was this something that men want to cook now or you know what I mean? No, Susan's kind of shaking her head.
Yeah, it'll be good to hear what we both say. It's a little bit of both. Like on the one hand, there's a huge economic driver. In 2008 and 9, when the recession hit, that was a big force of having this group to go at home. The second thing is the moms of the Gen X moms and the boomer moms did a great job. They taught the kids the ability to be able to do that and just the knowledge. Then shows and things like that are out there are possible. And then the innovation in appliances that were created that are much more easy and much more intuitive to do helped. But there's a lot that's at play there. It's still, make no bones about it, mom does still most of the cooking. Be very clear.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Also, I would add, so we used to have an industry advisor who would speak, and he always said, grilling was about the fact that mom would say, you make the best burgers,
Yes.
you are the best griller on the planet. It was about stroking dad's ego to get him to make a meal.
So my wife's been lying to me. Is what you're
It's
telling
the great lie of the
Maybe.
American
Okay.
marriage, yes.
You might be amazing, but also the grill, the appeal of the grill is there's no cleanup, right? So, I mean, I think it just, people love it. And then you've got HGTV making all the outdoor kitchens. And remember, we are entertaining more in home. And you'd rather have people outside than in your living room. Again, that's less cleanup. But one of the other things I think about men cooking is you, particularly with millennials, we've seen that delaying marriage and children is one of the things. So you've got more single guys potentially in the age where they take care of themselves. But I also want to point out on the other side, with boomers, and again on this convenience food side, we've got more people at any other point in history in this country in single and two-person households. So we've just got a lot of small households right now that, you know, and you're not going to cook as much and you're going to use more snack foods when you're in a single household or you're eating alone, even if you have 10 kids running around.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the household is shrinking, the kitchen is shrinking. I've talked about this before, but like a lot of people some people have proposed, hey, do we need a kitchen? Because it's obviously from a square foot perspective, by that measurement, it's the most expensive room in the house. Food comes at the push of a button now. You know, at some point, are we on a trajectory where some homes may just not have like full kitchens and they're just like buttons you push and food shows up?
It's possible. I think the challenge is this. Since 1946, we've never let the cost of food outpace our incomes. That's the challenge. The other part is the cost of food away from home is 3 to 4 times that in home. So how do I balance that versus saving money?
But
I
that's
wanna be able to
largely,
spend
that's a
my
North
money on
American,
RV.
isn't that largely North American? Because in China, from what I understand, food in restaurants is almost as cheap or sometimes cheaper than eating in the home.
I can't speak to that, but I know in America it's 3 to 4 times that. So it's one of those things where our desire might be to do that. However, the reality is, how does we do this economically?
So this was a reputable large media outlet published an article within the last year that said, restaurants are growing, and all of us at NPD are our toes curled. So I want to myth bust, if you'll allow me, because I do think this is important. About 80% of meals in America come from in-home. Only 20% come from food service. Half of Americans' food dollars are spent in restaurants. Okay, so it feels like the restaurant universe is much bigger than it is because it's half of our food dollars, but it's only 20% of our occasions. And the other thing is for multiple years now, that has been a low to no growth environment. 0 to 1, I think in food traffic, in the number of trips people are making to restaurants, it's up 1% now, I think.
A little less than that.
Yeah.
But think of population, it's still less than population growth.
Population growth is about 4%. So what's growing is that dollars are growing because there's been some inflation on the restaurant side due to labor costs and things, but also millennials and Gen Z love fast casual. And you're going to pay more for your meal at Chipotle or Panera or those restaurants in QSR. So the average cost per trip, average restaurant meal spend is going up a little bit. But I'm willing to bet that to get what they perceive as more authentic or clean or healthy or experiential, they're willing to pay a little bit more for that and maybe cut back on some other areas of restaurant spending.
Yeah, we're seeing in the kitchen electric space, the price bands that are growing, it's not the cheapest price. Consumers are willing to invest if it's a quality product. So don't be afraid about that. I think the bigger issue is just making sure it's the value and the quality that goes with it.
We've seen some fairly strong growth in a few kitchen categories. You guys call them the multi-cooker. A lot of people know about the brand of the Instant Pot and as the most well-known one. Talk a little bit about some of these newer categories where maybe we're seeing younger generations embrace maybe their first true kitchen appliance that they're calling their own.
Well, Instant Pot has been hot. It's went to, or not Instant Pot, but the category multi-cookers. And Instant Pot's hot too, but the whole category is a little over $750 million. And 2 years ago, it was $250 million. So it's just skyrocketing. And this whole part of it is leveraging the changes of eating habits, where we used to, in the 70s, you'd have a piece of meat and maybe 2 or 3 side dishes. And just structurally over the years, the side dishes have been incorporated with the main dish. So the slow cooker, which came out in the 70s, you know, it's just always been growing. This concept of these one dish meals is just now it's commonplace. And so what happened with the multi-cookers is we always know whenever we do need state studies that the number one need states at dinner is speed. So when they started talking about, at the time, I remember when I took this role, I took a picture at Target and there were 4 multi-cookers. And one said, or 3 of them said they slow cook, they sauteed, and they rice cook. And then one said 70% faster and slow cooked. The second I saw that, knowing what the need states that the consumer has, that's what took off. So part of it is these appliances are adapting to the fundamental consumer needs, but what's going with it is the demographics our people are eating at home. This kitchen electrics industry, the last 5 years, it's been growing between 5 to 12%. We tracked $2 trillion, and last year the industry that grew the most over the holidays, kitchen electrics, or small appliances, I should say. 2 years ago, small appliances. 3 years ago, small appliances. This Prime Week, small appliances. So this is a hot industry to be in because of the eating habits.
I want to maybe give a little bit of time to the audience if you guys have any questions, because these guys know a lot about generational shifts. Real quick, while these guys think of a question, you know, you look at smart home, Joe, the fusion, kind of this intersection of connected home with grocery delivery has been kind of fascinating to me. This kind of idea of like, you know, being able to have someone deliver your groceries, even put it in, so far as put it in your fridge. Are you seeing any sort of like traction for kind of this smart home that is enabling services and delivery in terms of, I don't know if your data tracks that, but what are you seeing in terms of that regard?
I think it's the key to really make smart home take off. I get asked many times by different appliance manufacturers, like, when's smart home going to take off? We've tried it, it just hasn't really took. But they're thinking about an app. But I love what I heard from the folks today, which is absolutely right. It's about what's for dinner tonight. It's about breakfast. It's about solving a bigger thing. And the consumers, especially that 25 to 30-year-old, is looking for inspiration. And it used to be a cookbook, now it's all recipes, but in the future it is going to be the appliance. And so as long as we can make this happen at work, but what's one of the keys? It's all these people that help enable it. It's making sure the food companies are tied in with the appliance companies. It is critical that the grocery retailers are able to execute and deliver on things that quick. Our window to make sure smart takes off has to fit in this next few years. So the importance of creating partnerships between the manufacturer, between the grocery retailer, between the appliance retailer, between the food companies, between the technology companies to connect all that. It is much more than an app. And the time is critical right now for us to make this work. Because if we do it right, this will set it up for decades and for the rest of our lives. But we've got to really start to execute and push the envelopes on speed now.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think about, Joe and I, we sit around and talk about this over beer. We just, we love this stuff. But one of the things we talk about is this idea of the path to consumption. And I would suggest, as you're thinking about your product or your innovation or where you're going to go, is put yourself in your shoes as a meal maker and think about that path from the moment of how do I decide and plan what I want to eat, to the how do I get it, where do I get it from, then to the prep and the cook, and then all the way through to the cleaning. And to the degree that you can connect or link those steps along that path to consumption, you're creating a shortcut in the process. My memory is horrible. Someone already alluded to this morning, I think talking about, I think it was Beth. Yeah. You're helping them with the drudgery of getting the meal on the table. So I haven't seen anybody yet connect it all the way through, but you see folks starting to create the connection. So again, like any card, I loved it because it was the inspiration, the decision-making, and the shopping. Now, once I get it home, if it links into an appliance with the screen and tells me how to do it, that's awesome. It's going to take time because that's infrastructure in people's kitchens and how often are they redoing it. But think about connecting those dots in that path and making shortcuts for people.
If you've ever done concept testing, you'll realize a concept has 4 elements. It has the hook, the I wish, I hate, I love, that we all think and feel whenever we're making a meal, serving a meal, planning a meal, all along that path to consumption. There's an I wish, I hate, I love. Then the benefit, and then the reason to believe, and the price. Oftentimes in tech-oriented businesses, as well as in kitchen electrics, we tend to view the technology as the benefit when it's really the reason to believe. We've got to keep focusing on what's the I wish, I hate, I love on the path to consumption. That's the success.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anyone have? Oh, right in the front row. Go ahead.
I have a question in terms of the data that you've seen. What is the biggest disconnect between what millennials and Gen Z are saying they want versus what they're actually purchasing right now?
I don't know if it's a disconnect as much as we have to accept the fact, as much as we think about, I talked about functional benefits, the healthfulness of, the food choices, a wellness lifestyle, that Gen Z and millennial are humans, and part of that is still indulging. Mm-hmm. So, Doritos and Oreos are really popular. They're huge Gen Z brands, right? Because they offer fun and experience and limited time, and because we still want those things. That's part of balance in our life. So sometimes people talk about it as a disconnect, but they're not angels that are only going to eat vegetables. And if I gave that impression, I don't mean that at all. But they're going to do both. They're still going to indulge, but overall, they are more likely to gravitate. I mean, there was a generational shift. We looked at 40 years of data, and as kids, as they come in, they are eating more healthful foods, less sugary foods and carbs than previous generations, and they're just taking that forward. And they have access. They can go to Sweetgreen. There's no Sweetgreen when I was growing up. So does that kind of address the question? It's more about framing them up as just human beings who still want to enjoy and will have craving moments and all those things.
We have time for 1 question because we don't want to run too long. 1 more? Okay, I'll run this down here.
So my question is more around, the data that we have about making things quicker, making things faster and instant. Is there a space where we can shift that and say, well, they've clearly not enjoyed that extra space time they gain, that it didn't make them happier or richer from that time. How about making that instead of a chore, an enjoyable experience, and therefore how can we make that a celebration in terms of cooking? So where is that disconnect? Are we not making this for fun, or is it becoming more of a chore?
We'll jump. So, Mom, what's for dinner? What's for breakfast? What's for lunch? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 18 years of their life. The joy of cooking is a book. That's about it. So, now, to be clear, cooking on Saturday or cooking on Sunday and stuff, there's going to be a little bit more investment. But the time pressures of Monday to Friday, that's a little bit harder. There's always going to be a need for convenience.
I do think, though, so I'm going to bring up 2, one relates to things we've seen here and one doesn't. I'm a mom of an 8-year-old, and I'm kind of weird because I'm an older Gen X who has a young Gen Z. And I eat anything. It used to be except Brussels sprouts and creamed herring, but now I like Brussels sprouts, so it's just creamed herring that I won't eat. My 8-year-old will eat 5 things. This absolute it destroys me. And so today, one of the things that's been inspiring is thinking about how do I make food, how do I involve him and make it more joyful? I don't know the answer to that, but I do think there's something to it. I love the idea I was looking at the June oven. I think my kid could operate that and make some different foods. I love that. And it's not just microwaving something, which, by the way, 98% of Americans have a microwave. It's now 99% because I got one recently. The other thing is not related to anything here. I just heard about something called Radish Kids, which is a monthly subscription box that sends them a very visual recipe card and tools and basic ingredients and involves them in it. So, I mean, I do think there's something to look, we're gamifying food, but is there something that we could do that way that is interesting and fun and engaging? I don't know the answer, but you're right, it's a drudge 365 days a year.
And I think that's a great insight about the kids, because 0 to 8-year-olds is a growing port, and if you can get them involved, if you can think of mom, what she has to do in the morning, from getting herself ready, getting the kids out the door, getting lunch, like it's a chaos. And so anything that you can do to help get the kid involved, maybe away from a video game and involved in it, like the mother is going to appreciate that. So if we can kidize our appliances, phenomenal.
If you could pick one point along that path to consumption that has the biggest opportunity that gets you the most excited, what would that be?
I mean, personally, if I could put in my preferences, my family's needs, dietary as well as, like what we like, and have someone lay out a menu for the week, and then the food just shows up and it gives me some instructions, I don't have a problem preparing it. Just have it there, manage it for me, so it's not rotting, and it's easy for me to get to it, because when I'm done at 5, I'm running out the door, picking up the kid from after school care, and then I've got a short window, and I can't be dinking around with not knowing what I'm making, which, by the way, is usually what happens. And then I'm food MacGyvering, and it's not pretty.
I agree. It's the orchestrating the meal. It's what's for dinner, and then the second is the cleanup. You can solve those two.
The number one reason why meal makers make dinner, I said that really awkward, is because I had it on hand. Because I'm deciding so last minute. I can pull it out. 33% of dinners is because I had it on hand. Help me get it there on hand and organize it for me, because dang, that's getting old eating what I have out of my pantry.
Well, this is a ton of fun. Guys, this has been great. Give them a big round of applause. And if you walk up here and grab their card and want to talk to them, they'll maybe give you like a statistic that they wouldn't give me, like free statistic for everyone, right, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. You got it.
Thanks a lot, guys. That's fun.